Well, it's summertime in Canada and all is full of life. The sun is shining, the trees are growing, the birds are twittering outside, and everything is happiness. But yet, for me, there is still an emptiness in my heart. As of July 11, my old friend Warhammer Fantasy Battles is no longer what it used to be, and it has turned into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Now, before anybody panics, this isn't going to be a hate video. This is not going to be, oh my goodness, it's all over and I hate you, Games Workshop. That's been done enough. I'm not going to do that. I've played a couple of games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not my Warhammer fantasy. It's not what it used to be. So all I'm going to simply do here is have a little bit of a getting it off my chest and a little bit of internal healing and talk about the 5 things that I'm going to miss the most about Warhammer. So here goes, in this order. I think comparing the 2 games, the one thing that I think I really enjoyed out of 8th edition fantasy that came in predominant, very predominant. Well, maybe it's not predominant because I've learned some other things about this, but what I'm talking about is the mystical terrain effects, right? So we had mystery swamps and rivers of light and haunted mansions and dwarven brew houses and all these things that had cool battlefield effects that your army could interact with. And there's lots of them. There's a really big menu of it. The reason I kind of lament it is because I think it really added an extra level of fantasy to a game that sometimes, if you just played pitched battle and battle line things, just came to be a little bit too mechanical and too simplistic, and it was just about the dice rolls of 2 infantry units bashing into one another and rolling dice until the other guy broke. It added cool things like imagine the day when your dwarven hammerers have a toe in the river of light that casts Baroness Time Warp on them, and how fantastic that is, or how that really menacing unit of juggernauts on your flank gets zapped by some haunted mansion building that's nearby and ruins one of their models so that it gives you a fighting chance. These are the things that kind of, I don't feel ever that they really tipped the balance of the game itself, but it certainly provided an interesting extra narrative to it. Now, whether you did random rolling to determine what your scenery layout was, or you and your partner that you're playing with sort of creatively came up with an envisionment of the battlefield and tailored the kind of mystical and magical scenery for that, either of those choices, great choices. And so I'm going to miss you, mystical scenery. I don't know that Age of Sigmar, it hasn't presented any yet anyway, but I don't know if that's going to meet the same kind of feel and extra invigoration of fun that those did for me. Second thing I'm going to miss is the psychology phase. Well, it wasn't termed a psychology phase in the game itself, but there was many instances where psychology came into play. Fear and terror and doing those leadership roles, having leadership mean something for several different instances, to control frenzy, to see if you're stupid, to see if you fear the guy, cold-blooded break tests, all these kinds of things. I'm going to miss that stuff a fair bit, I think, just in the incarnation that it was. I understand in the Sigmar rule set, they do incorporate a bravery statistic, so it's still there. And it is sort of a pseudo break test, I suppose, because your guys flee if you blow it on your break test. So that's still there. I don't know that I'll admit to you, I haven't delved into the undead army, so I don't know if there's any fear effect that still really plays a part. But I really haven't seen anything. I've looked through the Orcs and Goblins business, and there's nothing about frenzy or stupidity, except for some effects that you can grant from your hero powers that can get an extra attack out, grant an extra attack to a unit or something like that. But panic, I think, is the biggest of all those things that really doesn't play a part here. You can't have a whole unit just back off out of a combat or be terrorized so that they flee from a charge and physically move back off the table or back away from an enemy. There's none of that goes on. Really, all of that attrition into the units happens by those bravery tests that you take after you've had a round of combat. So I'll miss you, psychology and panic phase. I think you were an important part of Warhammer, and one of the unique things that made it a bit different than several other games. It meant more in Warhammer than it did in other games that I played. Something else, my number 2 now, sorry, my number 3 now, is customizing characters. Oh, I really am going to miss that. In the Age of Sigmar War Scrolls, you have a very fixed war gear setup or ability setup to your leaders. If we look at comparing a High Elf Prince, for example, your High Elf Prince can have a halberd or a spear, but effectively their attacks are the same. They have a different war scroll if you're mounted on a griffin. They have a different war scroll if you're mounted on a dragon, etc. So you can still do that. What you can't do, though, and because universally in the Age of Sigmar magic items are taken out of it, is you can't have any of those. So you can't make that lore master with the Book of Hoeth and a parrying shield of the Mereworm with his Sword of Might, like I used to like to do. You can't make that Cav Prince with his super armor save in the Dawnstone. I mean, when I looked back at the High Elf Army book, under the entry of Prince, geez, like it takes 3/4 of the page. You can be mounted on a chariot, on a horse, on a barded horse. You can have dragon armor, you can have a lion cloak, you can have a halberd, a great weapon, a sword, a spear, an extra weapon, etc., etc. All these various things, right? You can jump onto a dragon, you can jump onto a griffin. It's amazing, like the customizability that you could really invest yourself into that character. That's not there anymore. And I think that's the way that I felt about it too, is you could identify with that character by making it the extension of you. And that was what brings you and involves you into the game a little bit more. When you can make your general, in my case, Galadros Glimmerdawn of the High Elves, and I could arm that guy as I saw fit, and he was a bit of an incarnation of me on that battlefield. And I think that was a really key thing that I'm going to miss for sure. Okay, so I'm making my way to the top now. Number 2 out of my 5 things that I'm going to miss about Warhammer is the bigness. And what I mean by this is the visual look of ranking up units together, having 6 guys wide, 5 guys deep, 30 guys in a block, cavalry that goes for 4 ranks, a nice long Bretonnian lance, a horde of savage orcs. These kinds of things are the part that I'm going to visually miss. And the mechanics of how those moved and the way I felt about it being a full-on army game, that seems gone. And having a look at the Age of Sigmar, you can do that, but it's very impractical. Like, you can plop down your unit of 20 guys or 30 giant rats or whatever you want to do, and you can plop them down in the same movement tray that you used in the Warhammer Fantasy game. But very quickly, you're going to find that they have to split up. They have to reshape and move more freely to be able to get into the action and interact with the game. So that block unit, that bigness and that feel of it being a full-on army game, I don't think anybody can deny that's going away with the Age of Sigmar, and it's not going to carry over into that. So that's a really big thing that I'm going to miss, because aesthetically, thematically, and creatively, that's the kind of thing I wanted to see out of Warhammer, and all those 3 aspects are going to disappear with that. But lastly, my number 1, and this is more of a great fear than any of the other things, and this is that the gaming community will fracture and crumble. Fracture mostly, not crumble necessarily. I mean, everybody who's a hobbyist who's been deep into Warhammer is going to still continue to be a hobbyist in some form or another. But when I think of how Warhammer tournament events come together. It was a game that wasn't necessarily designed out of the gate to do tournaments, but it was quite easily adaptable to it. And when we think about tournaments in War and the Age of Sigmar, I think at this point it's far from that. It's going to take a lot to get there. We just had a talk the other day on Vince Venturella's channel about the possibilities of that. We all agreed it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of work and some massaging by many great brains to bring that together universally. So going to those events, part of why I went to those events is because of the community of people that were universally involved in it. And I think that under the guise of Age of Sigmar, it's going to be a long time before those events become something of a gathering place for all these kinds of people. I just don't think the tournaments are going to happen for a while. Now, if that goes for a year and a half or whatever it is before that comes together, I think that there's going to be a community disconnect a little bit there. So I think that people are going to sort of just turtle in on their own local guys. So you'll have a handful of guys that you play with regularly, your Age of Sigmar, or you may continue to play Warhammer Fantasy 8th Edition in each other's basements. And that's great that you're going to do that. But I worry that it's going to narrow the scope. For me, maybe for others, I'm sure there's others that feel the same way. Part of going to these events and having a big event where you have 20 plus or 50 plus common minds coming together as hobbyists, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss that ability to be in there and see all the great work that they're doing and be inspired by their hobby. So that's the number one thing that I am going to miss as we transition from Warhammer Fantasy Battles to Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So again, I want to conclude by saying this is not by any means, this is a bit of a me getting a sad on. This is not by any means a condemnation of the Age of Sigmar. I'm just pointing out all the things that I'm going to miss about the one incarnation that is going to be missing, what I believe, from the next incarnation. So let's get, without being a flame war of hate on Games Workshop and a flame war of hate on Age of Sigmar and anything like that, maybe share with me in comments below what you feel that you're going to miss the most about Warhammer. And let's just have a little bit of a happy reflection on the good old times of what it used to be and kind of come together on that. Okay, so look forward to your thoughts. Please write them to me down below, and I will bid you farewell for now. Bye-bye.